Totally watched. The most interesting on the internet.
Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Jessica Clarkson and I welcome you to What If episode. Snow White was designed to fail part 2 by Totally Watched. In the first part, we went through the differences between the original Snow White fairy tale and the 2025 adaptation, mainly at the character and actor level. This second part delves into a deeper analysis. We will answer the questions that were left open in the first part. So, could the film ever have become a blockbuster? What should have been different for the film to have been a success? Or would anything have helped? Was there a mechanism built into the film to ensure failure? Could it be that Disney shareholders want to get rid of the management team? The film only received 1 out of 10 points in the IMDb review, so there must be something shady behind it. Next comes a deep analysis of the Snow White movie and its background that you've never heard of. Hold on to your apple tightly again because here we go. Why was the 2025 Snow White movie a catastrophe? Let's first look at where the fairy tale originally came from, even before the 1937 Disney animation. Snow White is an old fairy tale. The fairy tale was written by the brothers Grimm, who wrote numerous famous fairy tales in the 19th century. Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm originally intended for their collection of stories to be scholarly, a patriotic attempt to study and reclaim German folk culture. They recorded the folk tales they heard with minimal edits, but after the first edition was greeted with a lukewarm reception, they decided to revise, and revise again. In 1812, the evil queen who menaced Snow White was her own biological mother. But in subsequent editions, the Grimms decided that a wicked mother was too immoral for children to deal with. They replaced her with a stepmother instead. Between 1812 and 1864, they published 17 editions of Grimm's fairy tales, working diligently to make the stories ever more appropriate for children. That meant the book had to reflect the Grimms' particular 19th century German bourgeois family values. And so, wicked parents became wicked mothers acting on their own, and then wicked stepmothers. Fathers were rewritten to be either virtuous but ineffectual or absent. Trickster children were erased entirely. For example, in the Brothers Grimm fairy tale, when Snow White lies dead in a glass coffin, the prince had the glass coffin carried to his castle and had it placed in a room where he sat by it the whole day, never taking his eyes from it. Whenever he had to go out and was unable to see Snow White, he became sad, and he could not eat a bite unless the coffin was standing next to him. Now the servants who always had to carry the coffin to and fro became angry about this. One time one of them opened the coffin, lifted Snow White upright and said, "We've been tormented all day just because of such a dead girl," and he slapped her on the back with his hand. Then, the terrible piece of apple that she had bitten off came out of her throat, and Snow White came back to life. Disney's 1937 version of the fairy tale has been made more sensitive and therefore touching. The prince's kiss is something completely different from a slap on the back. As we can see, the story has been changed numerous times. Is it possible to make a modern adaptation of this story? Of course, you just need to watch Disney's 1937 Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Do you think it needs modernizing? I don't think so. And the 2025 movie tried to modernize it and failed. Why didn't they just make a completely new movie? We'll answer that later. The 2025 movie is 1 hour and 46 minutes long. That's 46 minutes longer than the original cartoon. Why was the movie so long? Because they came up with a lot of new scenes that had nothing to do with the original story. For example, there's a whole musical number about how much Snow White likes to clean. Another great addition to the plot. Or another scene where Snow White attends some sort of medieval prom. Honestly, I don't know why they thought these scenes were necessary. Here's what one viewer wrote in their review on imdb.com. What could have been a visually stunning fantasy adventure with solid performances from its leads descends into a messy, obnoxious, unfocused affair where every scene seems determined to undo whatever progress the last one made. From the awkward attempts at humor to the musical numbers that make no sense, in context to the distractingly bad CGI to the utter waste of a talented cast, this is a movie that feels like it was made by committee. Everyone involved should hang their heads in shame at what they wrought here. This movie is what happens when you take a beloved classic, strip away everything that made it charming, and replace it with corporate-approved modernization that pleases no one. Critics argue that the film attempts to be empowering, but instead feels like a checklist of forced inclusivity and soulless spectacle, failing to resonate with audiences who cherish the original. This movie is an insult to the original story and the countless artists who have put their own creative spin on it over the years. It's not a faithful adaptation, a clever update, or a fun new take. It's just awful. The 2025 adaptation diverges significantly from the original animated film and plot, introducing new characters, altering character motivations, and shifting the focus away from the classic fairy tale elements, introducing new subplots and unnecessary complexities, and sidelining the essence of the fairy tale. This departure from the classic narrative left audiences confused and left many fans feeling alienated and disappointed. So, what else went wrong? Let's try to figure it out together. Last time we went over the individual actors' qualities and their suitability for the characters. How would changing the actors have affected the film? In the 2025 movie, the 7 dwarfs are replaced with 7 human beings of different heights. This change was made to make the story more inclusive and to avoid perpetuating harmful stereotypes about people with dwarfism. But in doing so, the filmmakers robbed the story of its magic. The dwarves were an integral part of the original fairy tale, and their absence in the movie left a huge void. Would hiring short actors have been enough to save the film? At the very least, it raises questions about the balance between inclusion and authenticity when talking about a live film that, in the end, isn't live. The dwarfs are reimagined, and the story emphasizes themes of empowerment and self-discovery, which detracts from the original's charm and simplicity. But what about the other characters? The casting choices were pivotal, and Rachel Zegler's portrayal of Snow White has been met with criticism. Zegler faced criticism and scrutiny, with critics pointing to her lack of depth in embodying the character's innocence and charm. Her comments post-release have not helped her case, leading many to question the producer's judgment in casting her. Rachel Zegler was not right for the role of Snow White. If we look at some comments from people who watched the movie, we find this one which says, "Honestly, I think Rachel Zegler is a wonderful actress and she deserves all the love she gets, but her voice just wasn't what I wanted for Snow White. Maybe if they had gone with a more traditional Disney princess type of voice, it might have worked better." And another one which says, "Snow White's voice was absolutely terrible. I don't know why they chose that singer, but it was horrendous. Whoever picked the music for the movie should be fired." Rachel Zegler is known for her powerful belting voice, which is perfectly suited for musicals like West Side Story. However, the voice of Snow White requires a different vocal style, something lighter and more ethereal. Perhaps Zegler's voice sounded too mature or too theatrical for the role. The score of the 2025 Snow White movie is quite different from the songs in the 1937 animated film. It is more contemporary and less whimsical. This may have made it difficult for Zegler to connect with the material and deliver a convincing performance. It is possible that the studio executives had a specific vision for Snow White's voice, and that they simply did not think that Zegler's voice fit their vision, so it had to be replaced. Whatever the reason is, it is clear that Zegler's voice was not well received by audiences. Many viewers felt that her voice was off-key and did not fit the character of Snow White. And here's a fun fact. Did you know that Kristen Bell was originally offered the role of Snow White, but turned it down in order to focus on her work as the voice of Anna in the Frozen franchise? So, would a different actor have saved the film? Or, for example, a more conventional actress had played the role of Gal Gadot? Would a more conventional actress have made the character's jealousy more believable? Would a more sensitive actress as Snow White have saved the film? While a more conventional actress might have made the jealousy of Evil Queen more believable, the film's fundamental issues extend beyond casting. But one thing is for sure, the casting of Gal Gadot as the Evil Queen and Rachel Zegler as Snow White was a major contributing factor to the film's downfall. But to be honest, it doesn't really even matter. Even if every single character in the movie had been perfectly cast, it still wouldn't have saved the movie from its many flaws. The fact is that the script is so poorly written, and the direction is so uninspired that it would take an acting miracle to salvage the film. The narrative's lack of coherence, the weak and uninspired script, and the overall tone of the movie, which is a strange mix of musical fantasy and gritty realism. And the failure to capture the essence of the original story would likely remain problematic, regardless of the actress's appearance. After all, the casting of the evil queen or Snow White is just one of several questionable decisions made during the film's production. All these changes show that the film is not faithful to the original story, and that it is trying to do something new. This is a mistake because Snow White is a classic and should not be tampered with. Trying to do something new will only alienate fans of the original story. And what about the story? Unlike in the animated 1937 version, the 2025 Snow White is portrayed as a young woman who dreams of exploring the world beyond her father's castle walls. She longs for adventure and feels suffocated by the stifling traditions of the royal court. But while these character traits may seem like an interesting addition to the story, they ultimately make Snow White a less sympathetic protagonist. In the original tale, Snow White is presented as a classic damsel in distress, a young and helpless victim of the evil queen's jealousy. This portrayal of Snow White may seem outdated to some viewers, but it was effective in creating a sense of suspense and danger in the story. In contrast, the 2025 version of Snow White is more proactive and independent, but this portrayal makes it difficult for audiences to root for her as the film's protagonist. Furthermore, the decision to make Snow White a teenager instead of a young child makes her relationship with the prince more questionable. In the original story, the prince is a handsome but somewhat dim-witted suitor who is immediately smitten with Snow White's beauty when he sees her lying in the coffin. While this may seem like a silly and unnecessary detail, it's actually an important aspect of the story. And although some people today consider infatuation with appearance superficial, it's a trait that we all have. And as we said in the previous episode, aren't we just a combination of different superficial factors? Appearance, voice, habits, thoughts, opinions, and so on. Individually, they are superficial, but together they create who we are, right? Isn't denying this a bit artificial? On the contrary to the previous one, the 2025 version of Snow White is a young woman who is conscious of her own beauty and agency. She doesn't need to be rescued by a man, and she's not afraid to speak up for herself. While this may seem like a positive change, it undermines the story's exploration of female objectification and the dangers of toxic beauty standards, which is one of the core lessons of the original story. And yet again, it's proof that the 2025 adaptation's production doesn't understand the original tale's teaching at all. What could have saved the 2025 Snow White? The problem with this is that the target audience has changed. Or rather, it doesn't exist. The old audience is made up of people who grew up with the original Snow White film and bedtime stories and are now adults. These people have fond memories of the 1937 version and are very attached to the story and characters. The new audience is made up of children and teenagers. But the new audience does not accept the new Snow White either. Why? Because it is not faithful to the original story and characters, the story they've already learned from children's books and an animated film. Even 5-year-olds have criticized the new film as strange. The new Snow White is not original either. It is a mere copy of other successful films. For example, the magical voice is something that already exists in Frozen, and the elimination of the character is something that already exists in Encanto. How is it possible that a successful director and screenwriter would produce a completely unsuccessful Snow White film in first place? What if the director or screenwriter had been someone else? Could they have brought a fresh perspective that respects the original while still appealing to modern sensibilities? The answer is no. The director and screenwriter are not the problem. The problem is the script. The script is based on a new story that is not interesting to the public. No matter how good the director and screenwriter are, they cannot save a bad script. Let's imagine, for example, that Greta Gerwig had directed and written the screenplay for the new Snow White film. Gerwig is a great director and screenwriter, as evidenced by her films Little Women and Barbie. However, even she could not save the new Snow White film because the script is not good. Even with all the changes, would 2025 Snow White have ever reached the popularity of the 1937 classic? The answer is no. The changes made are so drastic that they would never save the film. This leads us to the next question. Was Snow White designed to fail anyway? Yes. The film was doomed to fail from the moment the script was written. The script is based on a new story that is not interesting to the public. No matter how much you improve the direction, photography, soundtrack, acting, editing, and so on, the script will always be bad. The script is the heart of any film. If the script is not good, the film will not be good. So why would a major corporation let a bad script go through in the first place? What were the producers thinking when they embarked on this project? Their goals seemed misaligned with the expectations of the audience, leading to a film that felt disconnected from its roots. It seems they overlooked the fact that they were making a film for an audience that cherishes the original. Purging the core audience in favor of a modern agenda was a sure recipe for failure. In conclusion, it appears that Snow White was doomed to failure from the start. The desire to modernize a classic fairy tale, while noble in intention, resulted in a film that failed to resonate with audiences. It raises questions about whether this was a deliberate attempt to undermine Disney's legacy or simply a miscalculation by the production team. Could it be that Disney shareholders want to get rid of the current management team by allowing a movie to be made that is sure to fail? The answer is probably yes. This is something that nobody is talking about. There are many people who think that the new Snow White film is a mere coincidence. They believe that the film failed for various reasons, but that it had nothing to do with the current management of Disney. However, this is not true. The current management of Disney is responsible for the failure of the new Snow White film. They are the ones who gave the green light for the film to be made. They are the ones who hired the director and screenwriter. They are the ones who chose the cast. Simply put, they are the ones who made the movie. This leads us to the conclusion that the current management of Disney is incompetent. They do not know how to produce successful films. They are ruining one of the most beloved fairy tales in history. Walt Disney was the founder of the company and led the company for many years. Under his leadership, the company produced many successful films. However, after Walt Disney's death, the company began to decline. In recent years, the company has produced many bad films that have grossed little money. This decline is due to the fact that those who currently manage Disney do not know what they are doing. They have no idea how to produce successful films. It is possible that the Disney shareholders want to get rid of the current management team and they want to take over the company. Now that they have a basis, they can dismiss the current management team and put their own people in charge. Below the line, as you can see, there are a lot of things that the filmmakers got wrong, which is why the movie was a total failure. The writers and production have completely distanced themselves from the symbolism of the original film. Even though one does not understand the symbolism of the red lips, the Snow White skin, the ebony black hair, the apple, and other details, they still have an impact in the film and also create a visual structure. In the new version, the symbolism has been completely torn away. How could it even initially reach the level of an original film? The film is a clear example of what happens when you try to force diversity. Equality is essential for the future of humanity, but it must be approached openly. Perhaps forcing one of the most beloved fairy tales into a platform for highlighting the ideology of the production is not the right place. Sometimes people just want to escape into a fairy tale without pressure or coercion. After all, isn't that the magic of storytelling? This concludes our two-part in-depth analysis of Snow White. Tell what you think in the comments. Your opinion is really important, it really matters, it will have an impact on things. And please also tell us in the comments what you want to hear in the future. Instead, just clicking the thumbs down button, that's much more useful, and it's the best way to tell us what you hope. And that way we can deliver the content you want to see and hear. Please don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any new episodes. Hit the like button and click the bell icon and share it with your friends. That's the only way we can bring you this interesting news. The QR code at the end makes sharing easier. This video was made possible by Rexform Solutions. Better at being better. This is Jessica Clarkson. Thanks for watching the episode. Hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next episodes. Bye-bye.
Totally